Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over a series of video presentations I'm creating for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. Currently I'm going over our textbook that we're going to use for the class, that being ASP.NET MVC with Entity Frameworks and CSS by Mr. Lee Naylor. I am just begun our journey into Chapter 7 of 18 in the book. We did a little intro in the last video, and now we're starting to get into working with roles. As the author says here, before looking at users, we're going to work with roles, so that when we do come to work with users, we can include code for assigning them to roles during registration, edit the roles they belong to, and display roles the user details when the administrator views them. And when you think about it, not everybody, but quite a few people in life, when they go to work, have a role that they're supposed to do. For instance, I'm not doing this, but let's assume that I was a waiter at a restaurant. You know, my role might be to service this part of the restaurant. So anybody who comes and is sitting in this section of the restaurant, I take their order, I bring their food to them. Maybe I have to help clear their tables, etc. after they're done. I accept payment from them, etc. All right? So, talking about roles, you can assign roles for just about anything and everything. So the first thing required when working with roles is to create a role manager. So, add the following class inside the Baby Store namespace at the end of the identity config.cs file. So I'm going to grab this code here, copy it to the clipboard, go to my app start, identity config. I want to double check and make sure that's exactly what they said to do. So my app start, identity config, and right at the end, we're going to add this application role manager. Now again, please remember, be cognizant of the fact that we are working with a different project in this particular chapter. We are not, repeat, we are not working with the Baby Store project right now. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back here. So let's see. This code, in fact, let's just take a look at it right there. The code in blue. As mentioned on page 190, this code adds a new class that's named Application Role Manager. All right. You can see that this class right here, inherits from, the strongly typed class Role Manager, in this case Role Manager Identity Role, for accessing and managing roles. In the code that's here, all right, the identity role is the class the Entity Framework, or EF, uses for modeling a role. It's a fairly simple class in that there's not much in it. All right. It consists of an ID, a name, and a list of users belonging to the role. The create method that you see right here returns a new application role manager instance using the application DB context. All right. Next, it says to create a role manager, we have to add the following line of code to the config auth method after the last create O text call in the app startup and the app startup.auth.cs file. Well, let's go grab the line of code first, right there. And again, we are to go into app start, the startup auth. All right, we want to add this code after the last app create O context. So I imagine it's right there. Let's double check. Always good to do that before you start putting code in. All right. So we've got these 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it says that's it. So it seems to be pretty safe to think that we could come over here and add that line right here. All right. So that's the new one that we added, our own, and that is adding the context for the application role manager. So this code will now create an application role manager instance whenever the application is started. The configure auth method is called from the project's startup.cs file. And it runs every time the website runs. Okay? Again, I'm in no hurry here. If this takes me 20 different lectures, that's what it's going to do. All right? I'm only at 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes. So each one of these is going to be somewhere in the vicinity, as long as I remember, of about 20 minutes in length. So if I do 10 of those, 20 minutes in length, that's 200 minutes. Do the math. That's over 3 hours. When I lecture in the classroom, typically what I do is I lecture 50 to 55 minutes, give the class a break, and then lecture maybe 50 to 55 more minutes. Most of the time in the classroom environment, I try not to lecture. We have 4-hour classes that meet 5 days a week. And I try, I'm not saying I always do it, but I try not to lecture more than 2 hours in a class period. All right? That's typically all students can take of me. You know, and I'm not being funny or flippant or whatever, but you need some time to kind of comprehend this. So the reason I'm telling you that is typically what you wouldn't want to do here is sit down for 4 or 5 hours, whatever this takes, 2-3 hours, and watch all these videos. All right, so let's jump back into our text. Creating an admin user and admin role whenever the identity database is created using a database initializer. Next, we are going to create an admin user and an admin role to act as an administrator for the website. Admin is quite often that's what you're going to use for a login. All right, start by adding the following code to the appstart identity.config CS file. So first, let me grab the code, and it's over 2 pages. So let me grab all of the code that's here. All right. Copy. And again, it says that we are to add this code to the appstart identity.config.cs file. There's our identity config. This is what we just added. So let's paste that down at the bottom here. We may get an error message. All right. Again, I'm not saying we will, but I said we may get an error message because right now this is not complete. All right. So let's jump down into the next page where we've got more code and grab all of this code that's right here. All right. Good news, as far as I can tell, is I'm not getting any error messages right now. So the code that I added, all right, looks as though it would be okay. So it came down, it started here where this example shows you how to create a new database if the model changes. All right. Notice that amongst other things, we're creating a user admin at mvcbabystore.com with admin at mvcbabystore.com in the admin role. All right, that's what they're doing right here. So that's the name, that's the password, and that's the name of the role. All right, you'll see here it says create the role admin if it does not exist. So you look through first to see if it's there. Okay, and then we've got a user, and we're doing the same thing with the user. We're making sure that user isn't there. All right, now I'm just going to go and look at what is shown in our text as far as explaining that, but that was very quick, down and dirty little thing that I just gave you right there. So the author says here, again, I don't want to sit and read all this to you. We're adding a new class to initialize the identity database with admin user and that password. It says this demonstrates an alternative way to seed a database. All right. Remember, when we are seeding the database, in essence, what we're doing is we're providing the data. And remember, that's unbelievably important, because when you are using code first, as we've been doing in this book, we are creating our model classes, which are being used, for lack of better words, to set up the schema for our database, but they are not setting up the data. So we either have to manually add the data or have some kind of a seed file like we have right here. Now, they go into a lot of stuff as far as this, gets it from this, etc. I'm not going to go through this. All right. Some of the other stuff, seeing if this exists or this exists, I already showed you that. All right. Note, I don't recommend hard-coding usernames and plain text passwords into code as this. It's only done for demo purposes. Probably should have bolded that and put it in uppercase letters with some, whatever around it. You should never do this in a real commercial project. All right. You don't, I remember years ago I was a C programmer at AT&T Bell Laboratories, and there actually was a Linux file that had a list of all of the users' logins, and it had their passwords. Their passwords were encrypted, but I always thought that this particular file, if somebody could get into it, I look at it that when you're trying to go in, trying to get in, and if you're not authorized to go into a system, but you can get a file that has a list of all people's usernames, you're halfway in. You still have to figure out their passwords. Now, I had been working at AT&T Bell Labs. I started there, I don't even remember the year, maybe 82. So what, 35 years ago? Something like that. And when I started there, I had been there maybe a week, and my boss's boss, who was a kind of a smallish gentleman named Bernie, who was a very nice guy and very knowledgeable, he was walking down the hall, and I could see that he didn't look very happy. All right. And then my boss, whose name was Chun Chow, just again an excellent person, a great developer, he started walking by the individual offices saying, we are going to have a meeting this afternoon after lunch, and it is mandatory that you be there. Fine. So we had lunch. Afterwards, we went to the meeting. Bernie came in, got very red-faced, and evidently what he had done was he or somebody at AT&T Bell Laboratories had hired a couple young kids to come in. They gave them our logins. They also gave them our names, the names of our spouses, the names of our children, if they knew them, maybe even the name of our dog. And they asked these two young kids to try to see how many passwords they could crack and how many accounts they could get into. And they managed to get into, it was well over 75%. So Bernie sat there, getting more and more red-faced, talking to people about the value of having a good password. And it was funny because I won't mention even the gentleman's first name, but a guy I worked with was, I consider to be a very good friend. lost touch with him over the years, but I said to him, do you do that with your password? Because I don't remember what mine was back then. But, some people, you can do this if you don't know this already. You probably do, but just in case. You can go out and type in, for example, password generator. So, strong password generator. So I can go in and say, I want a password that's got 16 characters in it. All right? So I can say, now generate it. Now look at this password. Now that's the password, okay? Right there. Now, would somebody be able to crack that password? Sure. If they tried long enough, etc. But is that the kind of password that would be easy to crack? Capital H, tilde, little q, little a, 9, little p, colon, capital M, / 3, capital J, greater than sign, lowercase b, uppercase e, right curly brace, question mark. No, that would not be an easy thing. Now, what's the trouble with that one? It's a hard password to remember. Well, my friend, I asked him, he said, I'll tell you my password. He said, I guess I got to change it now. I said, what is it? And this was his. ASDF, ASDF. I said, why do you have that? He said, it's the first 4 keys on the keyboard, and it's easy. I said, well, what do you do when you have to change it? And he said, I do that. Well, I was like a little bit surprised. Now, for years, many people have made their password or even, something like this. All right? But look at all those. They're not hard passwords to crack. All right? And a lot of people, when they make up passwords, let's say I've got 3 kids. I have Taylor, Mackenzie, and Chloe. And not anymore, but a while back, my password for, I don't even remember what it was for. It was something for my key. I don't remember. But it was like Tay, Mac, CHL. Why that? Well, as you can see, first 3, first 4, first 3. And a lot of people end up doing that because they want a password that they can remember. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but even with that, you would never, ever, ever put that stuff into an actual program. All right? And if you were dumb enough to do that, you should at least encrypt the password. So in other words, I just showed you that stuff with a password. All right, so it says remember it. So how do you remember it? Well, they even give you a little, whatever. It says to prevent passwords from being hacked, a lot of things that you should do. All right, so I would go to a password encryptor or something like that. Password encryption tool. All right. So it says enter your word here and get a hash. Well, I would come in then with that password that I showed you, put it in here and encrypt it, and then I would get a hash. So that hash would basically take this password that I put in and it would change it to that. Now that is this encrypted. So again, why am I showing you this? Not to waste my time, not to waste your time, but to say that logins and passwords are the key to anybody, whether they're valid or invalid, of getting into a system. So you want to make it as hard for them as possible. All right, end of sermon. Next, we need a way to call the application DB initializer class. So a static constructor to this is, so do this as highlighted. So this is in the models identity.cs file. I guess it would be an identity model, I bet, I would believe, there. So let's do a save all, because we've changed quite a few things here. All right, so is this identity, let's just double check here. This is models, identity model.cs. So models, identity model.cs, good. Okay, and we want here right after public application DB context, which looks like it's right here. All right, and it's empty right now. Looks like that's the right place. We want to add, right after those two curly braces with nothing in them, we want to add this. I guess not here. They're not showing it there. They're showing it right here. All right. So let's leave that up here. And two things. First, as you know, the author quite often, what he does here is he comes in and takes some code. Now this isn't exactly what he's doing here, but sometimes rather he comes in and takes some code and it'll leave it blank like this and fill it in later. The other thing is, and I wish he would do more of this than he does, and that is to, oh, looks like I might have to move that. I guess that was in there already. Okay. Okay, so let's remove that one. But what I'm saying is sometimes too what the author does is puts comments in here. I wish he would do that more often. All right. All right. To be able to log in as the new admin user, we need to force the database to recreate. To do this, change the default connection string property in the web.config file as follows. Make sure it's all on one line in your web.config. All right, let's grab all of this, copy it to the clipboard. Remember, I can't say this to you too many times. We're working with our own program in here. This is not, repeat, not the baby store that we're working with in here. All right, there's that connection string. Change the default connection string as follows. So there's default connection. We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to change it to this. As the author has mentioned, we want to say it again. Default connection. Let's put this on several lines. All right. So connection string equals all this stuff. Now we need the attach DB file name, etc., etc. All right, catalog equals this. Integrated security. We can put the provider name on a new line. That should be fine right there. Did I make a mistake? Anything is possible. I don't believe I did. So I'm going to save this, go back here. Now start the website without debugging. Attempt to log in as this. Well, let's do this. So that's our username, and that's our password. All right. As you can see, it's the same thing, except in the second case, no, it's not. Capital A and the number 1. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to start the project up and log in. I don't think I need this open anymore, so let's just come in and let's start the project up. So once this comes up, what I'm hoping to be able to do is to log in, and my email, which is I guess my login, is right there, and my password is now right here. Okay, log in. Well, didn't like that. Directory lookup for the file, C:\user Rankin, identity2, app data, failed with operating system. The system cannot find the file specified. All right, create database, failed. Some file names could not be created. Check here. Okay. Well, there's the file, the system file, the word it's breaking. Let's go back to our text and see if I made some kind of mistake. Now, one thing I can do, I did just copy this. So I can come back to here, stop my run, go back to my web config file. All right, go back to my default connection. Okay, remove all of this, paste it in again, and literally try to put everything on one line. Okay? And name default connection string this, DB file name. Now that's everything on one line. All right? That really, I don't think that should have mattered, but connection string, data source, okay. Trying to double check the code that I've gone over thus far to make sure I didn't have to do any anything that I haven't done yet. Now my guess is I could be getting this error could be because of, let's see, I don't have this file. Alright, and I'm not sure why that would not be being created for me, but we need to force the database to recreate. To do this, change the default connection string, which is what I did in the web config file. Make sure it's done in one line. Start it without debugging and attempt to log in. Alright. Now it doesn't say that we could possibly have an error when we did this. But what I want to try to do is I want to try to go into the ASP.NET users and see if anything did happen. Okay, so we're going to go into here. And I've got nothing here, which is not a good sign. It did look like I put this in here correctly. Sometimes what happens is you've got a blank space in here, which can screw things up. Not that one there, not that one there, but I'm just looking quickly. Looks okay. I don't see anything with these spaces I've got in here that should have made this not work. Say that again. Well, I don't think anything is going to change. I think I'm going to get the same error when I try to log in, but we'll see. I don't think I did enough to make this change at all. So. Okay. Same thing. Create database failed. Some file names listed could not be created. And again, I think that's the one right there. That's what failed. The system cannot find the file specified. I thought that would actually be being created for me by doing this, and there's at least a chance that I'm wrong. So, as always, we come in and we attempt to debug. I am at 34 minutes. So, I will attempt to debug in the next lesson. Grab that error and throw the whole thing in here and see if I get anything back. Okay? Alright, so I have now finished with part 2.